and down the line, ending with Joellen. Question 2, a minute and a half to answer. This year's Pennsylvania governor's race may have over $100 million in spending. Do you think spending at this level distorts democracy? And do you support serious campaign finance reform, including public financing?
Yes.
Okay, so jump in the gun, Rob. All right, starting with Rob. Alexander. Go ahead. You're ready.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I said yes, yes, and yes.
Okay.
I think both are. I think it does distort democracy. I think we've got very good people competing in playing by bad rules, and whether we provide for the airwaves. Whether I would love to have Lincoln Douglas debates that are as heavily attended, and maybe 3 or 5 per county as this room. That would serve us very well. But we certainly need campaign finance reform.
Thanks, Rob. Katie?
I would say a full-throated yes as well for both. And I guess I just want to share experience. I will tell you I'm spending probably about 80% of my time on the fundraising piece of the equation. And I feel 0% good about that. And we absolutely need to change that. Share another experience too. When working in the White House with President Clinton, you tell people what you do for a living, and folks would say, oh, isn't all politics corrupt? And I had to say, whether it was working in the Senate with then Senator Gore working in the White House, no, I had never seen what people's stereotypical images of corruption in politics, right? Here's $25, I want your vote. But what I had seen was the corruption of time, effort, imagination, and energy. It was the corruption of people's efforts going so much to having to keep paying the meter and keep paying the meter and keep paying the meter. Frankly, in some respects, as a young person, as a senior advisor to the President of the United States, I had tons of authority and responsibility because you had to do it. You were the ones who were front line. I want to see the people that all of you elect to be spending 99, 100, 110% of their time building that vision for what we can and should be together as a people, and then getting it done and making it happen. That's where we want to spend our time, effort, and energy. So yes, we need reform so that our politics is about our body politic.
Thank you, Katie. Allison?
Yes, I do support campaign finance reform, and I do believe that there should be limits on gifts. For example, there should be disclosure. I've worked on that. I've voted for it. I have supported it. I think it's important to do. And I will say that it is a challenge to raise money. As one of the not self-funders in this race, I have asked many Pennsylvanians and others to contribute to my campaign. I have to say, 9,000 people have made contributions to my campaign. That's extraordinary, I think, already, and it's going to grow. The average contribution is about $250. Those are people who believe in Pennsylvania. They believe that we can change. They believe that I can lead Pennsylvania in a very new and different direction. I will bring different leadership, that I have a vision for Pennsylvania that will meet our challenges and help us be great. And I'm proud of that. And I appreciate what they're doing, because I could not be able to compete in this race without their generosity and their trust in who I am and in my leadership. So I'll take the opportunity to thank all of them and tell them I'm going to keep asking, because it's what we have to do. But I'd be proud to continue as governor to support campaign finance reform.
Thank you, Allison. Tom?
Okay, I have a very special perspective on this, having put $10 million of my own money into this race. And I lament the role that money plays in democracy. I think it is distorted. Now that sounds really hypocritical. I put $10 million of my own money in, and I think money distorts. How can that be? Well, I don't have too many other advantages in this race. You're looking at me and saying my face is obviously not an advantage. One of the advantages I have, one of the ways I have to get my story out is to spend money. Now, that gives me the ability to present my case. It doesn't mean that the voters are going to like the story, and they're going to render the ultimate verdict. But I'm playing by the rules of the game as it exists right now. I really don't like those rules, and if I were elected governor, I would do everything in my power to change those rules, to make sure that money is not as important as it is right now in the rules I'd like to change.
Can I just ask all the candidates, keep the mics up close to your mouths, because I know some people in the back are having a hard time hearing. That's okay. John?
Well, I was for public financing and campaign reform before it was cool on this stage. It's apparently cool now. I even took some derision from the political press for suggesting that this group voluntarily agreed to a $5 million limit. Nobody took me up on it and didn't get one call saying that's an interesting proposal. Absolutely, the avalanche of money into this race distorts this race. It distorts democracy across America. We all know that. At this point, this is a rich person's game or a big donor's game. I have not spent 80% of my time calling people for money. I just refuse to do that. I've spent 80% of my time traveling the state, meeting with people and talking with people in restaurants, on farms, anywhere anybody would want to sit down and talk about the issues. That's what I've been doing. We've been running a people's campaign. I do welcome anybody who is serious to the cause of publicly financing campaigns. I will note for you that Governor Cuomo in New York is making public financing of campaigns his #1 legislative issue in this session of the legislature in New York. Bill de Blasio would not have been elected mayor of New York without publicly financing of campaigns in New York City. This does distort democracy, and I hope the candidates here are sincere about changing it.
Thank you, John. Joellen?
Thank you. Yes and yes. And might I add that I am running a grassroots campaign. And I invite everyone in this room tonight and everyone listening in the television audience to go to my website, joellenlitz.com. And if you'll give me just $5, you'll help to level out this campaign. I'd really appreciate your help because you know what? I have a lot to offer. I just need a chance. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Joellen. Rebuttals? I go to Rob first. Katie?
Nope.
Allison? Tom?
Nope.
John?
No.
Joellen?
No, thank you.
Thank you very much. Question 3. You're so friendly.
Well, let me just say, I think you should give $5 to Joel. Please do that.
Question 3. We begin with Katie and go around on this one. 1.5 minutes. Pennsylvania's cyber charter schools are an abject failure. What will you do to stop sending taxpayer money to these wasteful scams? Begin with Katie.
Thanks, Eileen, and I want to speak about education broadly as well, which is priority #1 for me will be to pass a severance tax and to dedicate every penny of that tax to restoring the Corbett cuts that have eviscerated public education in this Commonwealth. We absolutely have to change a circumstance where kids can no longer get tutoring after school, where there are no opportunities for kids to learn and grow in classrooms that are overcrowded, and where teachers are put upon with an increasing number of requirements and paperwork and expectation and draining the life and creativity out of their ability to teach in the classroom. As a mom of 3 kids in public school, I see it every day. This will be the end of our economic prosperity if we do not invest in our teachers, invest in our kids, invest in our schools. Charter schools, top to bottom, need to be reformed. We need a level playing field, everybody held to the same standards and accountability. We need to make sure that there is openness and transparency in how much we are paying. And it absolutely makes no sense that a child that is in a cyber school with no bricks and mortars, no operation or maintenance costs, that we are paying the kind of dollars that we're paying there. And yes, I would take that on, and I would dedicate all of those savings, again, back into our public schools to not only restore the dollars, but improve those schools.
Allison?
Yes, cyber charter schools are, I have a simple answer to that. We would just stop funding cyber charter schools. That is actually an easy one to answer. It's about $370 million spent on cyber charter schools that have no evidence of helping children learn. Now, we cannot afford to spend public dollars on something that has no evidence of success. Draining money from our public schools. So I would start there, use those dollars from public schools. Of course, that is not the end to what we ought to do in terms of demanding accountability from our charter schools. There are some very good charter schools, there's some really terrible charter schools. We should demand accountability for performance and for use of public dollars, and I would do that. And I would close those public schools, or sort of the local districts, school districts who have the responsibility, take that responsibility, have the tools for that accountability. But whatever we do on charter schools, they are not the answer to assuring quality public education for every child in this state, which is the governor's responsibility and the General Assembly's responsibility, and it should be our top priority. So I would fund the public schools to the degree they should with a fair funding formula. I would make sure that we restore the $1 billion in cuts that, yes, are $1 billion less in our public schools. And I would make sure that children start school ready to learn with access to universal pre-K for 4-year-olds and full-day kindergarten. I was Democratic chair of the Education Committee for 10 years in the state Senate. I care deeply about public schools. My kids went to the Philadelphia public schools. This matters to me, it matters to all of us. It's about the future of our state economically and morally. Thank you.
Tom?
I believe that cyber charter schools, I agree very much with Allison. We need to make them accountable in the same way we make public schools accountable, and we have to come up with a fair way to fund them and to make sure that we're funding them in a way that does not take money unduly away from the public schools. And that goes for good charter schools, and there are good charter schools, and it goes for the cyber charter schools that really are not performing at all. The question is, where do these cyber charter schools come from? And I think we need to address that issue head on. It comes from cronyism. I think there are friends of people in high places who get these charters, and they should not, and we need to attack that. And I think it's also a function of people looking increasingly at education as a private rather than a public good. We need to remind ourselves that education is a public good. All of us benefit from the education our children get, our fellow citizens get. Obviously, I care about the education my daughters get in the public schools here in northeastern New York County, but I also care about the education the kids in Philadelphia get in the schools in Philadelphia, in Pittsburgh, in Erie, in Lancaster, and Harrisburg. We need to make sure that all of us understand that, because if we understand that, then the funding that we provide for public education makes sense. We're self-interested in that. We all share in the responsibility for funding public education because we all share in the benefits of it. We all share in the consequences of a bad public education system. We share in the funding for that because we share in the consequences when we don't do it well. I think part of what we're seeing with cyber charter schools is that we have forgotten why we support public education.
Thank you, Tom. John?
The cyber charter schools, when you look at the reading and math scores, are terrible. When you look at the graduation rates, they're terrible. The only thing they do real well is put up expensive billboards that you all are paying for. They are close to a scam, and in some cases they've been rated by the FBI, as well as some of the brick and mortar schools have been rated by the FBI. But stealing the money in Pennsylvania, it doesn't mean you lose the charter. So yes, it's $366 million. I've been campaigning for months and months and months to make this accountable. I'm actually not opposed to all charter schools. I believe good performing charter schools are an important option for poor children. But the poor performing charter schools, and there look to be all of the cyber charter schools, I'm very much opposed to your tax dollars going to those charter schools. In fact, let's remember that it's coming right out of local school taxes. It's one of the reasons that school taxes are going up, because taxpayers are paying for these bad performing cyber charter schools as well as bad performing bricks and mortar charter schools. I need to put one thing on the table. This is not an accident that we're funding cyber charter schools and there's no accountability. There's a real effort to privatize public education, and it must be stopped. Tom Wolfe is right when he says that education is a public good. It is not something to be privatized and turned into a profit center, and it's not something that should be ripped off and subject to the FBI coming in to protect taxpayers. Shame on Corbett, and shame on the legislature for allowing this to go on.
Thank you, John. Joellen?
First of all, I support public schools. I went to a public school, my children went to public schools. I think our teachers are to be honored and revered. They put up with an awful lot of being cut down and told that they're less than perfect. I admire teachers. And so anyone who is in this room that is a teacher or who is listening that's a teacher, thank you for your service to our children. They are our precious resource for the future. I'd also like to say that I agree, and I had said this in some other debates, that I do believe that cyber charter schools should be associated with the school district, and the school boards of those districts should have oversight. And those cyber charter schools should follow the same rules as our public school system. It's two different level, it's not a level playing field, it's two different levels of rules, and that's not fair. It's just not fair. We have a public school system for a reason. Let's use it. We have specialty schools in our career and technology centers. They're teaching the vocation to students who don't want to go on to college, and I think that they're wonderful as well, and I fully support our career and technology centers as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Ralph?
Yeah, you're highlighting, Eileen, just one of the many rip-offs in the crony capitalist approach that the current administration is embracing with public education. It is almost villainous, and we've been able to stop. I think I've been in the arena fighting Tom Corbett more than anybody, and we've been able to stop some things like the privatization lottery that would have hurt seniors through crony capitalism. But this is just one example of a pure ripoff, and there are a lot of them. You know, supposed funding for pensions that aren't being paid, supposed funding for lunches that aren't being provided. And I think we need to be a little careful, some of us who are deeply involved in public policy, to remember to speak in plain terms. Even the phrase funding, fair funding formula. This is an investment. Tom Corbett came into office talking about a spend number. It is wrong. And then pretending there was competition, elegant competition, when in fact it was crony capitalism that was a ripoff. I am very, very proud to have earned the endorsement of PSEA, and watch out for the words that are deployed in these fights. They, our opponents, talk about accountability, and what they mean is blame the victim, blame the teacher, the nurse, who's taking money out of her pocket to help kids learn, blame them instead of the con artists who are knowingly ripping off public education. We can win this fight, but it's not just about the what, it's the who and the how. You need somebody you can believe in who can win this fight. I can and I will.
Thank you, Ralph. Rebuttals? Katie?
No, thank you.
Allison? Allison?
No.
Tom?
No.
John?
No.
Joella?
No.
Rob?
I'll do a tiny one. Tiny one rebuttal just on, it's very easy to say we're going to take the local impact fee, which we need to repeal and replace, it's bad law. We're going to take all energy taxes and earmark it for education, but we cannot afford to put all our eggs in that one investment basket. We need to find revenues from tax reform and innovation. We need to do whatever it takes. Delaware tax loophole, the tax loopholes around tobacco, the tax loopholes around the sales tax, innovation around procurement, around senior care. We can save and find the revenues. We must do that.
So let's legalize and tax marijuana and put $600 million into the schools. Join me, Rob.
All right. You're confusing our timekeeper. Question number 4. You ready, folks? Ladies and gentlemen. Payday loans have interest rates that make it almost impossible to repay. There are proposals to make it easier for payday loans to be made in Pennsylvania. Do you support this effort? A minute and a half to answer. Allison begins.
Oh my goodness, absolutely not. I mean, we need to make sure that, and I was a part of it, really protecting consumers from predatory lenders and payday lenders, and I would not, as governor, allow us to reverse that progress in protecting consumers. I stood up and voted for and was really clear about making sure that consumers have more protections in the financial arenas. Certainly, the Consumer Protection Bureau that was implemented under some of the toughest Wall Street legislation that we implemented on the federal level is very important. This is where credit card loans also, which are really often predatory interest rates. We've actually reined those in as well on the federal level. The fact is that consumers need to make sure that we have protections from Wall Street predators, if you want to call them that, but really more so, this is really a case of payday lending being a really risky proposition, and I would stand on the side of consumers.
Thank you, Allison. Tom?
We have a history, obviously, in a free market system of having the government intervene when people are being harmed, especially consumers being harmed by practices of certain participants in the market. And it seems to me this is one area that the government is fully, it's legitimate for the government to intervene. We should say no to predatory lending in general. I think the federal government has already weighed in on that, and this does not distort the free market. We should be very strong on consumer protection, and payday lending at its worst is anything but protective of consumer rights. And we ought to really make sure the playing field that we have is leveled in favor of good rather than unfair business practices. So I would be very much in favor of controlling and outlawing the worst abuses of predatory payday lending.
Thank you, Tom. John?
This issue is one that's quite personal to me because I'm an immigrant to this country, and it's immigrants who often are victimized by what I'm going to call loan sharking. You can call it payday loans if you want, but I call it loan sharking. I was a legal services attorney in Philadelphia, working in North Philadelphia, Broaden area, and I saw how devastating even regulated payday loans really are. This is the very worst part of capitalism. That's what we're talking about here. We're not talking about a service that is useful to a capitalist system or market economy. This should be absolutely regulated, and I'd be quite fine with outlawing this kind of lending.
Thank you, John. Joellen?
I believe that payday loans prey upon the poor, and they should not be allowed. It's ridiculous to have people with a lot of money charging a lot of interest and taking from the poor. It's the reverse of Robin Hood. It should be the other way around sometimes. If they want to do it right, they would lend the money at a reasonable rate. A local bank is your best bet. So don't fall prey to these kinds of loan sharks. I agree that they are loan sharks. Thank you.
Thank you, Joellen. Ralph?
First, an update. This is one where at Treasury we're very happy that we were there fighting gridlock through the A Better Choice program. We talked a lot about a great program at the credit unions that rescued a lot of less affluent people from wealth stripping approaches, people who were knowingly going in and damaging people's lives and throwing them into a wealth trap, pretending it was a 12% interest rate, knowing that it was really going to be an effective compound interest rate of 400% because they would roll over the admin fee. We found it, we went in a very targeted way and worked in a great public-private partnership with the credit unions. And I want to highlight, that's that kind of passionate purpose that excites me about serving as governor. We talk about an unusual background. When I told my mom that I was going to leave Capitol Hill and go to Wharton Business School, my mom took me by the lapels and said, "I'm worried you're going to make your life too much about money." I pointed out to her the Democratic Party had a fairly high number of lawyers, but maybe didn't have enough entrepreneurs and people with MBAs and progressive values. And I have the high honor and privilege of using high-end financial skills to help not just entrepreneurs and job creators, but less affluent people get treated much, much more fairly. These working, hard-working people need to be defended, not offended, by the chief executive officer who's publicly elected by the people of Pennsylvania.
Thank you, Ralph. Katie?
Yeah, thanks. I think on this issue, Joellen said it right. This is pure and simple preying on the poor, and my agenda would be the exact opposite of that. It would be to absolutely say no to these payday loans, but to go further. Allison touched on consumer protection, and I touched on it earlier too. But right now, as we're gathered here, there are people who are on the verge of potentially losing their home or losing their business. Why? Because they signed up for electricity plans that had way down in the details, just like people lost their home in these nefarious mortgage plans that, you know what, without their knowing, after a year of relatively cheap rates, flipped them into these ballooning payments. That's got to be stopped. And when I called that out yesterday to the governor, what did he say? He said it's the consumer's fault. Every bit of that is absolutely unacceptable. We need to go further also defending the consumer in health care costs and making sure people know what bill is going to be coming their way. But the third thing I would do too is this is about making it so that people don't have to grovel and beg to make ends meet. That's why I am pushing very hard, not only for an increase in the minimum wage, and yes, for restaurant workers as well. But we have to bring jobs here that pay a decent wage, that offer retirement security with defined benefits, not doubling down on Wall Street and hedge fund managers. And I think we also need to make it so that people can start their own businesses, not through loan sharks, but through the ability to grow their initiatives and hire people and grow our economy at the same time.
Thank you, Katie. Anybody have a rebuttal?
No.
I can wait 30 seconds. Okay, the next question. Question 5. This is a little lengthy. So the question on itself, just some background information, so just giving you a heads up. And this one will begin with Tom in terms of the answer. The Pennsylvania Women's Health Caucus is a bipartisan caucus of the Pennsylvania legislature. And in December, this caucus launched a sweeping agenda for women's health, including proposals to protect pregnant women at work, support nursing moms, keep women's health centers safe, strengthen pay equity laws, and make it safer for domestic violence victims to call the police, just to name a few. The purpose is to get working on real women's real problems and stop piling on the abortion restrictions. In light of the Corbett administration's proposal to cut benefits for people currently on Medicaid, what will you do as governor to reverse the current course and advance the women's health agenda? Starting with Tom.
Why did I get the longest question? I'm sorry. No, we need to reverse the war on women. I'm the father of 2 daughters, and I completely understand that much of what, if not all, of what the right is doing in its war on women is to basically disempower women. We need to do just the reverse. We need women to participate, be full participants in the workplace, in our economy, in our society, and that's not going to happen unless we do the things that are on this agenda. So I fully support this. As governor, I will do everything in my power to make sure that women have a full seat at the table, and that we do everything as a state to do what William Penn first did 300 or 400 years ago, to lay out the welcome mat and make sure that this state is open for business for everybody, regardless of gender, sexual orientation, or color.
Thank you, Tom. John?
Well, you can start with Medicaid expansion. I think that's understood to be obviously very important to all people, but especially women. In October of 2013, our campaign looked at Governor Cuomo's agenda for women in